All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday, August 29th. My name is Mike Coleman, and today we are going to be talking about the game of learning, which essentially is gamification in learning-based content. So, we'll get into a little more into that about what that means, and kind of like what my thoughts are on that. But before we get into that, let me first introduce myself. So I am Michael Coleman. So I am an instructional designer at Riot Games. So what that essentially means is like I make training and learning based content around video games, around processes to support video games and things like that. I've been an instructional designer for roughly 10 years, and I've been at Riot Games for a little bit over 5 years. It's been an awesome experience. I think the favorite part of my job and my role is to combine my love of creativity and converting complex concepts into digestible pieces for people to understand, but also helping people. Like at the end of the day, if I'm doing my job well, people are becoming better versions of themselves. So with that, let's get into the topic, which is gamification within learning-based content. So when we're talking about that, I mean, see, sounds really cool as a term, like gamification and learning-based content, very buzzwordy and all that. But what does that actually mean, right? So first off, I think the first question is naturally, what is gamification? So does anybody out there know what gamification is or is familiar with the concept of it? Um, well, if you're not familiar, then let's go through some definitions. So according to the Cambridge Dictionary, um, gamification is the practice of making activities more like games in order to make them more interesting or enjoyable. For the Merriam-Webster definition, it's the process of adding games or game-like elements to something such as a task, so as to encourage participation. So I think, if you look at these two definitions, I mean, this sounds really great, right? Like obviously, when we're involving learners and we're teaching people things, like we want them to be engaged. We want them to enjoy the training that they are engaged in. And obviously, we want them to participate and enjoy the fact that they are participating, right? So when we're talking about game-like elements and how we kind of accomplish that, like what does that actually mean? So some of these game-based elements that you'll generally see utilized in training content would be stuff like badges, right? So it's just like to acknowledge achievement, to kind of show like ranking and like kind of foster friendly competition and community within that space. I think just general things to kind of show the accomplishment along the path. I think, in addition to that, we also have the idea of tracked progression over time. So this in and of itself kind of supports the sense of accomplishment as well, along with the badges, and kind of shows your progression to give that sense of like where you started to kind of where you are and like how you've developed. And then finally, the idea of rewards, like specifically extrinsic reward. So, this is to reward people for their effort, for their engagement, for their development, and all those kinds of things. And also kind of trying to cycle the loop of behavior between engaging with content, creating an outcome, which is learning, and then taking those rewards and generally baking them back into the content loop to kind of continue it along. So when you look at companies like Kahoot or Udemy or Duolingo, all those come to mind as companies that really lean heavily into leveraging gamification within their content to kind of help foster and enrich the learning experience. So, for a while now, I think that the world has generally been very enamored with the idea of gamification and including it. It's been kind of trendy and things like that lately, especially in the L&D space. So, let's see how the world has kind of felt about this and reacted to it. So globally right now, the gamification market size is valued at about $11.6 billion as of last year. By 2033, it's expected to reach $96.2 billion. I mean, obviously, those are really huge numbers. I'm not like a finance person per se, but I think, regardless of that, it's very obvious to just show that in terms of the world, in terms of corporate America and things like that, like how much value and how much focus is being put on gamification as a technique, and thus like the actual financial investment that's being put into that, right? So I think when we look at that, a company that is really utilizing some of the core gamification mechanics within their content is Duolingo. So how many of you out there have used Duolingo before? Has anybody used Duolingo or learning any languages? I'm currently learning German and Japanese, which is a whole other story for another day. But yeah, so maybe some of you have used Duolingo or are currently using it and have your streaks going and things like that. So within Duolingo, you see each of these elements kind of displayed and utilized to help engagement within their learning experience, right? So you have the badge system. Let's see, I got Richard just started using it about a month ago. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. So Richard said that, I love Duolingo, started using it about a month ago. A great example of gamification, have been using it in some instructional design classes. Absolutely. And we'll go into right now to like why I think that is. So like I said, the badge system, right? So this is a fairly recent ranking of like me within the Amethyst League. So, again, it's showing the XP examples. It's kind of showing like how like where I'm at. It gives me the desire, like if I have friends on this list, they kind of like want to compete with them in a friendly and supportive way. And so like the badge system works very effectively for that, right? Additionally, you have that progression tracking system. So this is the actual learning path that you see when you go through. So as you can see, like you can see where you kind of started, you can scroll down, you can also go through each of the individual elements. So again, it's like presenting the progress that I've made to give me that personal sense of accomplishment, but then also it just kind of helps keeps you going, like in conjunction with the other mechanics that they're using to kind of want to re-engage with the learning experience consistently. And then finally, you have the rewards system, right? So within Duolingo, when you complete missions or when you complete lessons, or like basically when you have various types of engagement with their ecosystem, you get these gems. The gems can be used for things like freeze streaks or streak freezes rather. So like, part of it you see in that middle screenshot up at the top, I have a 208-day streak of learning, which I'm super proud of. And like most of my Duolingo people like know about the whole streak idea, right? So you can use these gems to like freeze a streak if you miss a day so that you can still have your streak continued. You can buy emojis and different things for like your characters to kind of represent yourself. So all of this kind of, like I said before, kind of continuing that content loop between engagement, being rewarded, using those rewards to enhance the engagement, and then repeating it all over again while learning is happening all along the way. So, when we think about gamification again, and we look back at those definitions, I think something that we really notice that's interesting is, right, so this Cambridge definition, the core focus areas are interest and enjoyability of content. And then within Merriam-Webster, it's talking about encouraging participation. So, I think all that is really awesome. When we look at some stats about the effectiveness of gamification itself, gamification is shown to increase employee engagement by over 48%. Obviously, like that's huge. It's, basically 50% increase just by using some of these mechanics. And additionally, companies that apply gamification within their learning experiences, 69% of employees are likely to stay within an organization for over 3 years. And I think especially in the corporate climate that we're existing in now, like employee retention along with employee engagement overall, like these are huge stats. So, obviously it's saying from a company perspective, at least, and what companies prioritize in terms of their in terms of their employees, I think these numbers are great and they can definitely be considered wins. But I think that also within this, you kind of see what the challenge is about gamification. And the challenge there is, you can have engagement, right? But engagement does not necessarily equal learning. There's some correlation there for sure. Like people that are more engaged are more likely to learn, but you can absolutely be engaged and not learn anything and just leave the experience just feeling really good. So, I think that in and of itself, in terms of learning specifically, is the real opportunity areas. Like you're getting people there, you're keeping people there, but what are they really leaving with? Are they leaving with a good time, or are they leaving with growth and development? So, I think also for any L&D professionals or anyone interested in L&D, specifically, learning retention is a notoriously difficult metric to track accurately, because there's so many different factors in terms of like tenure within a role, your manager, employee relationship, all of these different things that kind of, when you look at trends across like high performance and things like that, it's really hard to pin whether it's actual like development and learning and retention of content that is causing a growth in performance or whatever. So that's kind of a thing that we always challenge with, that we use gamification to try to enhance. So, naturally, I've gone through this whole speech to talk about what gamification is, how it's great, but also maybe it's not that effective. And I'm like proposing these questions and all these kind of things. So, naturally it's like, well, how can we do it better? And I think, in order to give my perspective on that, especially as someone that is utilizing gamification and also within the gaming industry itself, where we're developing things purely using these mechanics for fun, I had to share my perspective on what my favorite genre of games is. So I love RPGs. I'm a huge RPG fan. I love Final Fantasy specifically. I'm playing through 16 right now. Grandia is another one. Persona. I don't know if there's any gamers out there. If there are, if you want to drop in the chat, maybe what your favorite RPGs or games are. I'm just curious to know. But RPGs are my favorite genre of video games. So for people that are not familiar, the term RPG stands for role-playing game. And essentially, what that means is that typically within these games, you're on a journey either to save the world or, defeat some kind of grand opposition, and you need to gain strength and abilities along the way. And so, within a lot of these games, there's a super strong lore, world building component. And good lore can do a lot of the heavy lifting. But for me, at least, I think that the story is in how you react to the story. And I mean that like literally and metaphorically, right? Is that, what really makes RPGs great for me, and what I appreciate about them, and what I know a lot of other people that appreciate them feel, is that, what skills that you choose to develop over time, let's say whether it be a fire spell, or are you a healer, or all those kinds of things, and like how you interact with certain characters within the game, all these different elements have a dramatic impact on like how your overall experience is, either directly through the way that future interactions happen, or just how you choose to engage, whether you're out there doing a lot of damage, or whether you're healing your party and that kind of thing, right? So nice. Baldur's Gate 3 and Mass Effect, both awesome games. And Destiny, I just started playing Destiny because they had a sale on the DLC, but that's another question. But that's awesome. Yes, all of those are great examples, so thank you for sharing. But yeah, so this is what I really, really love about RPGs. But then, at the end of the day, how does this relate back to learning and gamification, right? So I think that it relates directly in the sense of, again, as somebody that is a gaming industry professional, what we strive for in development of like gaming content, and what we're striving for in terms of like learning content is very, very similar. What we're really looking for is to create the experience in which the learner can really perceive the lore and development over their learning journey, right? So they can see their story, they can see their progression, and that's presented to them and kind of helps to support their learning experience moving forward. And that could be whether it's personal or professional learning. Like the key is to kind of create an environment where like that story is supported and enriched, and at the end of the day, it's creating a fulfilling experience as well as teaching them things along the way. So for me, that's where my idea for like where I see gamification going in the future is something like a learning RPG. And so I don't mean that in the strictest sense of like you launch a game that is RPG based, but is, essentially just about learning things. I think in some ways that would solve some of these issues, but in other ways it wouldn't. But what I really mean by that is kind of utilizing the structures around how RPGs choose to engage and help you develop, and then transposing that into like the learning space. So, what that might look like is, say you are a first year medical student, or even just like a first year college student in general, right? And so you're starting at the beginning of your journey, and you'll have what was called like a skill tree. So for those that are not familiar, skill tree is essentially like you'll have all these different nodes where you can, again, like increase your fire spell from like level 1, level 2, level 3, or increase your health, and make these decisions on how you kind of mold the kind of nuances of like your character. In this case, your character would be yourself. So I think that carrying over those RPG concepts, you have customized skill trees. So if you're a college student, it's like, oh, so my profile is I'm a first year college student and I'm moving out on my own for the first time. So it's like, okay, cool. Here are some resources on like people that have just moved and lived in for the first time. Here's some different things. Here are courses, people that have been successful in the coursework that you're currently engaged in. Here are the courses that they took. Here are the resources that they used, and presenting those to people to kind of enrich their experience. And then they can use their own progression and these resources to kind of fill out their own kind of personalized learning journey. In addition to that, I mean, I think anywhere that you go right now that has any kind of connection to tech, AI is going to come up. So here's where AI kind of places in here. So NPCs in games it stands for non-playable characters. And basically these characters are here to help give you nuance and context around missions or side missions, and basically just enrich the overall experience. And so for here, we can use AI both for data analytics in terms of like really building out these profiles to help people kind of self-identify and learn what resource would be most helpful for them. And then also potentially engage with an AI like kind of guideline or whatever. And this could be as simple as something like you have your AI bot that helps kind of you go through your learning journey within school. And then simple things like, hey, there's a break coming up, here's some ideas for resting and recharging for yourself, and just different things like that again kind of like fill in the gaps of like the overall learning experience, both personally and professionally. And then finally, relevant rewards. So where I see here is, again, using the kind of college student example, what if you have credits that you get from completing your courses that then you can use at like your favorite pizza shop on campus, or use to with a partnership with a fiduciary service that you help new college students that don't have a ton of history with financial literacy, to help them understand that, and basically kind of again using and leveraging the engagement that already exists to kind of build out a more comprehensive learning experience, and also just kind of give this person the ability to kind of complete their entire learning experience and not just focus on the courses themselves. So the end result of this is, not only achieving your main goal, which, in this case, in this example, would be graduation, but then additionally, you have helped this person grow overall and kind of instilled both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for them to continue learning, to continue down this path, not just within being a student, but in being like a high performer, just a happier, more fulfilled person. So that's kind of where I see the future of gamification is like going further with how we leverage those mechanics, and creating something that's really meaningful and special and personalized for anyone that's engaging with the content that you have. So that's kind of where my thoughts are. Do we have any questions? Okay, so we have a question from Abigail. In what ways have you applied gamification at your work? Do game designers, developers like to learn through play, or do they get tired at the end of the day from working on games and don't want to learn in this modality? Those are really, really great questions. So let me kind of go through them one by one. Abigail, thank you for sharing that. So Yes, I do apply gamification at work currently. I'm in the final stages. Actually, we had our last meeting last night of launching a global onboarding program for and like roughly 1,500 employees across the globe. And so, gamification in this instance, we, all this content is housed within an LMS, which for those that aren't familiar, it stands for Learning Management System. So this is kind of like if you've ever used Udemy or anything, it's kind of like the housing of like how you interact with courses, how they feed up into paths and like certifications, all that infrastructure, right? So within this LMS, we have things like badges. We have a certification system where people can go through a certain group of courses and then they can be certified as a trainer, which allows them both opportunities for advancement in their career to go from potentially just a subject matter expert in a space to being able to facilitate and train. And then also, since there is a social learning component built into the LMS, you have things like the badge systems and things like that to kind of show what people have accomplished, what they're really passionate about, and that kind of helps inform future decisions about their careers and things like that. And then in terms of do game designers and developers like to learn through play? I think in some ways it depends. I think overall, yes. So like we have both a pause to play event and a pause to learn event on campus. And what those basically mean is for an entire day for pause to play, where literally everyone doesn't do their normal role work and instead they literally play their favorite game. So we might play games that Riot have created, or we might play like Mario Kart or whatever. And that's to reinforce the fact that we are gaming industry professionals. And that's a really awesome thing. And, that's something to be celebrated and not to be forgotten, kind of to the point of the second part of your question. And then pause to learn is similar in that, like, we're in a space that we have a ton of resources. We have a ton of buy-in from leadership and a ton of investment, both in terms of time and actual money in self-development, in self-learning, things like that. So on this pause to learn day, it's literally like you can learn about anything. You can learn about watercolors. You can learn about how to, switch out your alternator on your car, whatever the case, but it's just about personal development. So, we have these built in as like social engagement opportunities within the space. And within that, like our team will be involved with helping develop like how people engage with these events. And so learning through play is like, yeah, we might make a game, or you might have to, use the reward system where you go to 5 different stations and learn 5 different things. And from there you get badges where you can get exclusive merch, and like, everybody likes merch and things like that. So that's kind of some of the ways that we try to leverage gamification and learning through play, like within my actual job and what we're doing both internally and for like external work. So thank you for your questions, Abigail. From Jessica, what suggested platforms do you suggest people start with when creating games for learning? So honestly, I would say even before starting with creating full-on games, I really like Articulate Storyline. I wasn't a huge fan going in because it can be a little intimidating in terms of like all the different like mechanics and like pathways and logic behind the interactions. But if you really dig in, like there's a lot of people that I follow on LinkedIn and things like that, that if you really dig into Storyline's capabilities, you can create everything from like a simple interaction to like your standard learning like Jeopardy game that, like corporations love to use to kind of like create that like Jeopardy. We're in a ballroom at a hotel and like everybody's like yelling answers in that kind of environment. And then you can create full-on games. Like in certain instances of projects we've created basically, short form games, literally just utilizing like Boolean logic, like if-then statements and things like that, and the interaction mechanics that they have within an Articulate Storyline. So I would say that would be a great one to start to both get the learning content aspect of it and then also the game aspect of it. So thanks everybody. Great questions. Appreciate it. Yeah, if there's any more, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I really appreciate y'all giving me your time and your attention. And, I hope that you have an awesome rest of your day if there aren't any more questions. But thanks, everybody.